I never thought I'd be the guy writing about my marriage falling apart. Hell, I never thought I'd be writing anything at all. But here I am, trying to make sense of how 15 years of marriage can unravel faster than a cheap sweater. My name is Jack Thompson, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm an electrician, have been for 20 years now. Not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills and lets me provide for my family. Every morning, I wake up at 5:30, grab my coffee, kiss my wife Sarah goodbye, and head out to whatever job site needs me that day. It's not the kind of career that gets you invited to fancy cocktail parties, but I've always taken pride in my work. Knowing that I'm keeping the lights on for thousands of people, that means something to me. Sarah and I met in college, back when she was studying marketing and I was learning how to wire a house without electrocuting myself. She was the ambitious one, always dreaming big. I was the guy who knew exactly what he wanted: a steady job, a loving family, and maybe a decent lawn to mow on weekends. Somehow it worked. We got married right after graduation, bought a modest house in the suburbs, and started our family. Emma came first, our beautiful, headstrong daughter who's now 14 and knows everything about everything, at least according to her. Then Dylan arrived 5 years later, our baseball-obsessed 9-year-old, who can recite every Yankees statistic from the past decade, but can't remember to pick up his socks from the living room floor. They're good kids, the kind that make you forget about a tough day at work the moment you walk through the door. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Sarah climbed the corporate ladder at our marketing firm, eventually becoming a senior manager. I kept the lights on, literally and figuratively. We had our routines: family dinners on weeknights, little league games on Saturdays, and lazy Sunday mornings with pancakes and cartoons. It wasn't exciting, but it was comfortable. Safe. At least that's what I thought. The changes were so subtle at first, I barely noticed them. Sarah started staying later at work, but that made sense. She just landed a big project with some tech company. She bought new clothes, started going to the gym more often. "I just want to take care of myself," she'd say when I commented on it. And why would I question that? Every marriage advice column tells you to support your spouse's self-improvement efforts, right? Then came the phone. Sarah had never been particularly tech-savvy. This is the woman who once called me in a panic because she thought she'd broken the internet when the Wi-Fi went down. But suddenly, she was glued to her iPhone, constantly texting and smiling at the screen. When I'd walk into the room, she'd quickly flip it face down or switch apps. "Just work stuff," she'd say, but something in her voice didn't sound quite right. The real red flag came due. Ring Emma's choir concert. Sarah spent the entire performance texting under her program, the blue light from her screen creating a tiny spotlight on her face in the darkened auditorium. Our daughter was singing a solo, her first ever, and Sarah missed it because she was typing away on her phone. When Emma asked later what she thought of the performance, Sarah gave some vague compliment about how lovely it all was. The hurt in Emma's eyes told me she knew her mother hadn't really been watching. That night, after the kids were in bed, I tried to talk to Sarah about it. "You seemed pretty distracted at the concert," I said, trying to keep my voice casual as we got ready for bed. She was sitting at her vanity, applying some expensive night cream she'd recently started using. "Oh, I'm sorry," she replied, not looking away from her reflection. "We've got this huge campaign launching next week, and Mike's really counting on me to handle everything perfectly." Mike Anderson, her boss. The more I think about it now, that should have been my first clue. Sarah had been mentioning him more and more frequently over the past few months. Mike thought her ideas were brilliant. Mike appreciated her dedication. Mike understood the importance of work-life balance. That last one had made me laugh. What kind of boss understands work-life balance by keeping their employees at the office until 9 p.m.? But I trusted Sarah. Maybe that was my mistake, or maybe it was just being naive. When you've been married to someone for 15 years, you think you know them. You think you can tell when they're lying. You think they'd never betray you. You think wrong. The first concrete evidence came on a Tuesday. I remember because it was Dylan's baseball practice, and Sarah had promised she'd make it this time. She'd missed the last three, and our son was starting to notice. "Mom's coming, right?" he asked that morning, his Yankees cap slightly too big for his head, slipping down over his eyes. She promised. I'd adjusted his cap and nodded, trying to sound confident. "That's what she said, buddy." Practice started at 6:30. By 7 o'clock, Sarah still hadn't shown up. Dylan kept glancing at the parking lot between pitches, his little face falling each time a car turned in that wasn't his mother's silver Lexus. At 7:45, as practice was wrapping up, I got a text. "Sorry, emergency at work. Big presentation tomorrow. Tell Dylan I'll make it up to him." Something inside me snapped. Maybe it was seeing Dylan's disappointed face one too many times. Maybe it was the way Sarah had been growing more and more distant. Maybe it was just instinct. Whatever it was, I made a decision. I dropped Dylan off at my sister's place, told him I had to run an errand, and drove to Sarah's office. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in, just a few cars scattered across the vast expanse of asphalt. Sarah's Lexus wasn't among them. The building was dark, except for the security lights in the lobby and the janitor's cart visible through the glass doors. No emergency meeting. No big presentation prep. Just another lie. I sat in my truck for a long time, watching the janitor methodically make his way through the building. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. "Working late. Don't wait up." The casual dismissiveness of those 5 words made my stomach churn. Where was she really? Who was she with? The questions I'd been pushing away for weeks suddenly refused to be ignored. That night, Sarah came home around midnight. I was sitting in the dark living room, pretending to watch SportsCenter reruns. She jumped when she saw me, her hand flying to her chest. "God, Jack, you scared me. What are you doing up?" I noticed she was wearing a different outfit than she'd left in that morning. Her hair was slightly damp, like she'd just showered. "How was the presentation prep?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She barely hesitated. "Exhausting. Mike really wants this campaign to be perfect." Mike again? Always Mike. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand the truth. But something held me back. Maybe it was cowardice. Or maybe it was the knowledge that once certain words are spoken, they can never be taken back. So instead, I just nodded and said I was going to bed. As I climbed the stairs, I heard her phone buzz. She waited until she thought I was out of earshot before checking it. I heard her soft laugh, the kind she used to reserve for me. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept peacefully beside me. The woman I'd shared my life with for 15 years suddenly felt like a stranger. The next morning, as I got ready for work, I noticed a business card that had fallen out of her purse. The Riverside Hotel, a luxury place downtown, the kind of hotel where rooms cost more per night than I make in a day. The back of the card had tomorrow's date written on it in Sarah's neat handwriting, along with the number 827, a room number. I put the card back exactly where I'd found it. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I started Googling divorce lawyers. The first name that came up was Rachel Anderson. As I stared at her website, something clicked. Anderson, the same last name as Mike. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? With trembling fingers, I dialed the number on the website. A crisp, professional voice answered on the second ring. Rachel Anderson's office. I took a deep breath. "Hi, my name is Jack Thompson. I think our spouses are having an affair." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Rachel said something that confirmed all my worst fears. "I've been waiting for this call." The coffee shop was quiet for a weekday morning. I'd suggested meeting here instead of Rachel's office. Something about sitting in a lawyer's office made this all feel too real. I spotted her immediately. Tall, elegant, with the kind of confidence that comes from RS of arguing cases in court. She had Mike's business card in her hand, turning it over and over like a nervous habit. "Jack Thompson?" she asked as I approached the table. I nodded, suddenly feeling underdressed in my work clothes. "Rachel Anderson," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "I ordered you a coffee. Black, right?" I must have looked surprised because she smiled slightly. "Lucky guess. You seem like a black coffee kind of guy." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, two strangers united by the worst possible circumstances. Rachel broke the ice first. "So, how long have you suspected?" I took a sip of coffee, buying time to organize my thoughts. "A few months, maybe longer if I'm honest with myself." "You?" She nodded, pulling out a small notebook. The signs were there. Mike started working late, bought new clothes, joined a gym. She looked up at me. "Sound familiar?" It did, painfully so. Over the next hour, we compared notes. The pattern was identical. Sudden changes in behavior, mysterious late nights, hidden phone conversations. Rachel had been more proactive than me. She'd already hired a private investigator. "Look at this," she said, sliding her phone across the table. The screen showed a credit card statement. Charges from restaurants I knew Sarah loved, hotels I'd never heard of, all on Mike's corporate card. "They're not even trying to hide it," Rachel said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "They think we're too stupid to notice." She was right. Sarah and Mike had gotten careless, confident in their ability to fool their spouses. The thought made my blood boil. "I have a plan," Rachel said, leaning forward. "But I need to know if you're ready for this to get messy." I thought about Dylan's face at baseball practice, about Emma's hurt expression at her concert, about 15 years of marriage crumbling like sand through my fingers. "I'm ready." Rachel's plan was simple but effective. She'd been monitoring Mike's corporate credit card activity. The Riverside Hotel reservation was for tomorrow night, room 827, just like the card I'd found. "They've gotten into a routine," Rachel explained. "Every other Thursday, same hotel, same room." Her laugh was bitter. Mike's always been a creature of habit. We spent the next few hours plotting. Rachel had already contacted her friend at the hotel, a manager who owed her a favor from some legal trouble. He'd agreed to help us set up the confrontation. "The key is timing," Rachel insisted. "We need solid evidence, and we need witnesses." She'd arranged for a notary to be present, along with her private investigator. Everything had to be documented, legally airtight. As we wrapped up our meeting, Rachel hesitated. "Jack, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start, there's no going back." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. Behind the professional exterior, I saw the same pain I'd been carrying. "Are you?" She squared her shoulders. "They broke this. We're just making it official." That evening, I went through the motions of normal family life like an actor in a play. I helped Dylan with his math homework, listened to Emma complain about her English teacher, and pretended not to notice when Sarah came home late again. She kissed me on the cheek, smelling of unfamiliar perfume. "Sorry I'm late, honey. Big day tomorrow." You have no idea, I thought. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m., I heard Sarah's phone buzz. She slipped out of bed, thinking I was asleep, and went to the bathroom. I could see the blue glow of her screen under the door. 20 minutes later, she came back to bed, placing her phone face down on the nightstand. I waited until her breathing evened out before reaching for it. Locked, of course, but it didn't matter anymore. Tomorrow, I'd have all the proof I needed. The next morning, Sarah was up early. She spent extra time getting ready, picking out her best suit, applying her makeup with careful precision. "I might be late tonight," she said casually over breakfast. "Don't wait up." I watched her pack an overnight bag, pretending it was for the gym. She kissed the kids goodbye, promised Dylan she'd make his next baseball game. Another lie to add to the collection. After she left, I called my sister. "Can you take the kids tonight?" Lisa didn't ask questions. She'd always been good that way. "Of course." "Everything okay?" No, nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. Just some stuff I need to take care of. I spent the day in a fog, barely able to focus on work. Rachel texted updates throughout the day. Mike had also packed a bag. He told his secretary he had a business dinner. Every message made it more real, more inevitable. At 6 p.m., I met Rachel in the hotel lobby. She looked different, harder somehow, like she'd put on armor for battle. "They're both here," she said quietly. "Mike checked in 20 minutes ago." Sarah arrived 5 minutes later. She handed me a small envelope. Inside were divorce papers, already drawn up, waiting for signatures. The private investigator, a discreet man in a suit, positioned himself near the elevators with a camera. The notary, a stern-faced woman, stood ready with her stamp and seal. Rachel's hotel manager friend had given us access to the service elevator. Everything was in place. "Ready?" Rachel asked, her hand hovering over the elevator button. I thought about the first time I met Sarah, how young and full of hope we'd been. I thought about our wedding day, the promises we'd made. I thought about the life we'd built, the children we'd raised. Then I thought about the lies, the betrayals, the broken trust. "Ready," I said. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt like an eternity. Rachel and I stood side by side, not speaking. I could hear her controlled breathing, see her hands clenched into fists. The doors opened silently. Room 827 was at the end of the hall. "Eve." Re-step felt like walking through concrete. Rachel nodded to the notary, who stepped forward and knocked firmly on the door. "Room service," she called out. There was movement inside, hushed whispers, the sound of rushing footsteps. After what felt like hours, the door opened. Sarah stood there in a hotel robe, her face flushed. The moment she saw me, all the color drained from her cheeks. "Jack," she whispered. "What? What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, Mike appeared behind her, hastily buttoning his shirt. He froze when he saw Rachel. "Honey," he started, but Rachel cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Don't you dare honey me, Mike." She turned to the notary. "Now, please." The notary stepped forward, official papers in hand. "Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Thompson, you've been served." The next few minutes were chaos. Sarah tried to explain, her words tumbling over each other. Mike attempted to take control of the situation, his corporate negotiation skills failing him completely. Rachel stood like a statue, watching it all with cold eyes. And me? I just felt empty. The private investigator documented everything. Every denial, every excuse, every attempt at justification. Sarah begged me to listen, to understand. Mike tried to buy his way out, offering settlements, promising changes. But it was too late, far too late. As we left the hotel, Rachel and I rode down in separate elevators from our spouses. The lobby was quiet now. The evening crowd thinned out. We stood there for a moment, two people who'd just blown up their lives. "Drink," Rachel suggested. I nodded. We both needed one. The bar was dark and anonymous, perfect for people trying to forget. Rachel ordered a gin and tonic. I stuck with whiskey. "Well," she said, raising her glass, "to the end of lies." We clinked glasses. The alcohol burned, but it was nothing compared to the pain in my chest. "What now?" I asked, more to myself than to her. Rachel shrugged, but her expression was softer than before. "Now we rebuild. Separately, but maybe." She trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. We sat in comfortable silence, two wounded people finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of healing. Rachel checked her phone. "The kids," she said. "I should." "Yeah, me too." We walked out together into the cool night air. Before we parted ways, Rachel touched my arm lightly. "We did the right thing, Jack." I looked at her, this strong, brave woman who'd helped me face the truth. "Yeah," I said, "we did." As I drove home to pick up the kids from my sisters, I thought about tomorrow. about having to explain to Emma and Dylan why their world was about to change, about the battles ahead. But for now, at least the lies were over. Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies destroy. And maybe, just maybe, destruction makes way for something in W to grow. Telling the kids was the hardest part. I'd rehearsed the conversation 100 times in my head, but when the moment came, all my carefully prepared words felt hollow. Emma and Dylan sat on the couch that Sunday morning, still in their pajamas, cartoons playing quietly in the background. I turned off the TV and sat down across from them. Kids, we need to talk about something important. I started, my voice steadier than I felt. Emma, sharp as ever, picked up on the tone immediately. Her face changed, suddenly looking older than her 14 years. It's about Mom, isn't it? Dylan looked up from his baseball cards, confusion clouding his features. What about Mom? I took a deep breath. Your mom and I, we're getting divorced. The word hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Emma's face hardened, but Dylan just looked puzzled. Like Jimmy's parents, he asked. Does this mean we get 2 Christmases? I couldn't help but smile slightly at his innocence. Yeah, buddy, something like that. Emma wasn't so easily distracted. It's because she's been seeing someone else, right? The directness of her question caught me off guard. How did you? She shrugged, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. I'm not stupid, Dad. I saw the text on her phone when she left it on the kitchen counter. My heart broke a little more. She shouldn't have had to find out that way. Dylan looked between us, reality finally starting to sink in. But where will we live? What about my baseball games? I pulled him close, ruffling his hair. You'll still live here with me most of the time. Mom will get a new place nearby, and I promise you won't miss a single game. He nodded, but his lower lip trembled slightly. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and awkward arrangements. Sarah moved into an apartment downtown, closer to her office, closer to Mike. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly smooth. Rachel had made sure of that. Sarah didn't fight the terms, maybe out of guilt, maybe because she just wanted it over. Either way, I got the house and primary custody of the kids. Rachel's divorce from Mike was more complicated. He tried to hide assets, to play hardball with their prenup. Big mistake. Rachel knew every legal trick in the book, and she used them all. In the end, she got the beach house, a generous settlement, and the satisfaction of watching Mike's carefully crafted image crumble in the corporate world. Through it all, Rachel and I kept in touch. At first, it was just updates about the legal proceedings. Then it became coffee meetings to discuss the kids' schedules. Somehow, those coffee meetings turned into lunch dates. We found ourselves talking about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. One Saturday, about 2 months after the hotel confrontation, I took Dylan to his baseball game. To my surprise, Rachel was there, sitting in the bleachers. I hope you don't mind, she said as I sat due. WN beside her. I remembered you mentioned his game was today. Dylan hit a double that day, his best play of the season. As he stood on second base, grinning from ear to ear, Rachel cheered louder than anyone. After the game, Dylan ran up to us, still excited about his hit. Did you see that, Dad? Did you see? Then he noticed Rachel and, without missing a beat, asked, Hey, Ms. Rachel, did you see my double? She smiled warmly. I sure did, slugger. That was some hit. Dylan beamed, then turned to me with the brutal honesty of a 9-year-old. Dad, can Ms. Rachel come for ice cream with us? She's pretty, and she likes baseball. I felt my face flush, but Rachel just laughed. Well, with an invitation like that, how can I refuse? That afternoon, sitting in the local ice cream parlor with Dylan chattering about baseball statistics and Rachel adding her own commentary, something shifted. It felt, right? Emma was harder to win over. She was polite to Rachel but distant, protecting herself from more potential hurt. I understood. Rachel understood too. She never pushed, never tried to replace Sarah. She just offered friendship, support, and a willing ear when Emma needed to talk. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Emma had a big school presentation coming up, and Sarah had promised to be there. But at the last minute, she called to cancel something about an important client meeting. I could see the disappointment and anger on Emma's face as she hung up the phone. Rachel, who had stopped by to drop off some paperwork, overheard everything. You know, she said casually to Emma, I used to get terrible stage fright before my court appearances. Emma looked up, surprised. Really? But you're so confident. Rachel smiled. Want to know my secret? They spent the next hour talking about presentation techniques, body language, and how to channel nervousness into energy. The next day, Emma nailed her presentation. When she came home, she hugged Rachel without hesitation. 6 months after the divorce, Sarah announced she was marrying Mike. The kids took it better than I expected. Maybe because by then, they'd grown used to our new normal. Or maybe because they'd seen how much happier I was. Rachel and I had started dating officially, taking things slow, making sure the kids were comfortable every step of the way. One evening, as Rachel and I sat on the back porch watching Dylan practice his pitching while Emma did her homework at the patio table, I realized something. The pain wasn't gone. I don't think it ever completely goes away when someone betrays you like that. But it had transformed into something else. Something like wisdom, or maybe grace. What are you thinking about? Rachel asked, noticing my contemplative mood. I took her hand, running my thumb over her knuckles. Just that sometimes the worst things in life lead us to the best things. She squeezed my hand, understanding perfectly. Dylan's voice interrupted the moment. Dad, Ms. Rachel, watch this pitch. We turned our attention to him, standing proudly on his makeshift mound. Emma looked up from her textbook, rolling her eyes but smiling. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but maybe it was better. Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Rachel and I sat on the couch, sharing a glass of wine. Jack, she said softly, do you ever regret it? Finding out the truth. I thought about it for a moment. No, I replied honestly. The truth hurt like hell, but the lies were killing me slowly. She nodded, understanding completely. Besides, I added, pulling her closer, if we hadn't caught them, I wouldn't have found you. She laughed softly. Careful, Thompson. That was dangerously close to being romantic. I grinned. Well, I'm learning from the best. You're the one who keeps taking my son to baseball games and helping my daughter with her homework. Rachel settled against my chest, her presence warm and comforting. They're good kids, she said simply. You're doing a great job with them. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. We're doing a great job. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Inside, my home was filled with a different kind of peace than before. Not the false peace of ignorance, but the real peace that comes from living honestly, from facing the truth, no matter how painful, from finding strength you never knew you had, from discovering that sometimes, when everything falls apart, you end up exactly where you're supposed to be. Life isn't perfect. There's still difficult days. Days when the kids miss their mom, even though she's only a few miles away. Days when old hurts surface unexpectedly. But there are also amazing days. Days filled with baseball games and homework sessions and family dinners where laughter comes easily. Days when I look at Rachel and the kids and know, without a doubt, that love can be better the second time around. Because sometimes love isn't about keeping things the same. Sometimes it's about having the courage to let go of what's broken, to face the truth, even when it hurts, to trust again, even when you're scared. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about finding someone who helps you pick up the pieces and build something even stronger than before.